Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast this morning. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Today we have with us a man who I've come to have great respect for. We've been business partners, and maybe more importantly, he's been a personal mentor to me in business and in life. And so I was really excited when he accepted to come onto the podcast and talk to us about what makes him such a great person, a great gentleman, and a great leader. So Frank, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks, Cory. I appreciate that introduction. Sometimes the word great, I feel, is not a descriptor for me. I just try to do the best that I can with God's blessings every day.
So Frank, tell us a little bit about your background. What did you do for a living, and what are you doing now?
So to give you some background on how everything kind of worked out, let me tell you a little bit about my dad and my mom and the circumstances that happened early in life that I think were really shaped me. My dad was a farmer in North Dakota. He lost the farm sometime in 52 or 3 when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And he went into the oil field business. He started driving truck for a drilling outfit and later became a roughneck, and in the truest sense of the word. Worked on drilling rigs since probably around 57 or so until 1981, I want to say. He retired. Part of working in the oil field is that you do a lot of moving. Our family, we lived out of a 5x7 trailer. And when I say we lived out of a 5x7 trailer, we had one that hooked onto a back end of a 1957 Ford station wagon. And I might come home from school. By this time, I'm 9, 10 years old. I might come home from school and Dad shows up, or Dad's already there, and he says, "We're packing, we're leaving." My dad was the kind of autocrat that you didn't ask him where we were going, you just packed. And so I spent a long time on the road going from oil well, oil field to oil field, oil town to oil town. For an example, when I was in the 6th grade, I went to 6 different schools in the 6th grade in 1 year. During that, I learned a couple of things. One is I learned how to get acquainted with people very quickly. But the sad part about it is that, and this is where it gets a little raw, you had to learn to let people in your life go very quickly. Because as I tell people, and this is the truth, we could pack that trailer in an hour and a half and unpack it in an hour. That's how practiced we were with that. And all of our belongings, everything we owned, fit in the back of that station wagon and that 5x7 two-wheel trailer. I'd come home from school and Dad is sitting there, and if Dad was home when I came home from school, I knew I was going to say goodbye to, but I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to anybody. That impacted my life very, very drastically, because I can say without any hesitation, I didn't learn how to have a friend or to keep a friend until probably 10 years ago, because my background said anybody that I became close to, I would just have to leave. So my choice was then, and it might have been 15 years ago, my choice was then just simply don't become close, become acquaintances. And I think that if men in general have a really honest moment with themselves, the hardest thing for men to do is to form relationships and have friends. I'm still really bad at it. I've gotten a lot better. But that's the piece. The social side of what Cory sees is because I had to learn to get to know people. I was the new kid in school every 2 or 3 weeks at times. And so I had to get to know people quickly. But I always knew when I got to know them, I would never have a chance to say goodbye. We didn't have cell phones. Half the time where we were living, we didn't even have a telephone. So it made one side of my life very, very successful. because part of my success, I believe, whatever I've achieved, is my social side, because I could immediately read people, immediately know what they were thinking, and immediately knew what their hot buttons were. And that worked really well for me in business because I was so focused on what their need was. And people just kept coming back to us and coming back to us. And you can see it today, Cory, they still come back to us. And
that's something I didn't know about you. And for the listeners, we'll get into this, but Frank has a lot of friends. And everyone in the Las Vegas market knows who Frank Martin is. He built one of the largest construction company in the Las Vegas, Nevada market over the last 40 years. Extremely successful, Martin Harris Construction. So yeah, that's actually surprising to me, that story, but it makes sense. But man, you're really good at making friends. So, but that's very interesting. Glad you shared that.
Thank you. I knew from the time I was in the 6th grade at one of those schools that I wanted to be a carpenter when I graduated from high school. And so at every school, I always took shop class. We didn't actually settle down until about 1961 when my dad got recruited to go to California. My dad was like I said, he was a roughneck in every sense of the word. And so he drank a lot. He was not a very pleasant person to be around. Our relationship was strained until a year before he died, 2 years before he passed away. And there was always something out there that made it strained. Dad got recruited to California. He was very, very good at his job. Can't ever take that away from him. People wanted to work with Dad. Dad was a derrick man. A derrick man is the guy that's up in the crow's nest, that's 100 feet off the deck. And he's responsible for catching and securing the drill stems, the drill pipe, as they pull it out of the hole to change out the bit and to pump more mud in. That derrick man's holds everybody that's on the platform's life in their hands, because if he misses 120 foot of pipe, 100 foot of pipe or so, people can die. And he was very good, so he got recruited a lot. He got recruited to California. The Roughnecks, because in those days OSHA didn't exist, Roughnecks knew how to work safely. And they were rough and they were tough, but they also knew how to work safely. And they knew my dad was the guy they could count on first time, every time. And he got recruited to California to work on some offshores. And then, because it's the Roughnecks, oil field workers were such an incestuous group of people. They once they've had a crew assembled, they tried really, really hard to keep that crew, just like your concrete guys today, because they know they can depend on them, right? So Dad, some friends of his, came to Las Vegas, Nevada to work at the Nevada test site. And they recruited Dad from California to the test site. Instead of drilling holes for oil, he started drilling holes for bombs. And he worked out at the Nevada test site for 20 years, from 61 all the way through 1981. In the truest sense of the word, like I said, he was a roughneck, and he continued to be that. And he worked a lot. The question was where he spent his time when he wasn't working. But outside of that, I got a work ethic from him. I had a very, very close relationship with my mom, because my mom was the stable person in the family. When we were working in the oil fields, our source of sustenance, our source of food, was either the antelope or the deer that Dad killed on the way back and forth to the rigs, because they were always out in the middle of nowhere. And also about every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we would travel to my grandma and grandpa's farm, where we would pick up 100 pounds of pinto beans. We ate beans for lunch, we ate beans for dinner, and the wild game meat that Dad would kill. And every now and then we'd get a quarter beef from the farm. In the mornings, we ate pancakes that Mom made out of flour and egg, and our sugar, or our syrup, maple syrup, if you can believe it, was a cup of sugar and a cup of water boiled with some drops of mapeline in it to give it the color and the flavor of maple syrup. And that basically was the way we ate for 10 years.
Your life sounds to me like it should be made into some type of a movie.
We're
a lot
only
of
on the very beginning.
I know. And a lot of people, I think they're just so far removed from that type of a life, that type of survival. They don't understand it. And it feels like a movie to be talking to somebody who grew up that way. But I'm grateful to have you on here to talk about that, because I think if any of our kids listen to this, that it's really helpful for them to be able to say, not so far removed from my life today, people lived this way, and some people probably still do. And to see and recognize the blessings that they have in the affluence that they grow up in, whether or not that really be real affluence, or if that's just, I don't have to wonder where my next meal comes from. To just have that gratitude that they aren't at that point. But I can tell just by talking to you, Frank, that you have your personality and who you are today is shaped by the way that you grew up. So I guess my question is a yes or no question, but would you change the way that you grew up if it changed who you were today?
Only in a small way. And that small way was that I wouldn't have waited as long as I did to go to the lengths that I did to fix the relationship with my dad. I waited till he was 2 or 3 years away from the deathbed. And I wouldn't have waited that long, if that makes sense.
That's a lesson learned for anybody listening, that, I think we all have, there's many people who have strained family relationships for whatever reason. And ultimately, I know you turned into a pretty religious guy. We can talk about that later, but that's I think it's good advice for anyone listening to just let it go a little bit. Even it doesn't mean that they didn't do wrong, but just to let it go. So Frank, you have some great personalities traits in my mind. You're extremely honest and straightforward. You're a very smart businessman. And like you mentioned, you're extremely hardworking. And you talked about the hard work, the example of your dad on the hard work side, and
Yes, sir.
stability of your mom. Where did some of these strong character traits that you have of honesty and integrity and doing the right thing, where did that come from, and how did you become that kind of person?
Mentioned my mom was always straightforward and loyal to an absolute fault to my father. I believe, when I look at the points that you brought up, I believe the hard work came from my dad. My mom busted her ass too. I mean, when we were on the farm, she was out there farming and driving tractors and trucks right alongside my dad. And she came from a farmer family. That was nothing new for her. I think, though, that I believe the honesty and integrity piece, which is kind of a cornerstone for me, really did come from my mother. If you look at the world, sometimes you have outstanding influences that are bright and shining examples of how to do and what to do. In my father, in many aspects of his life, I had a bright and shining example of what not to do, because I seen the pain that it brought to me and my siblings and my mom. And I took an oath probably when I was about a sophomore in high school that I would never be that, because things were just really, really hard. That in the family, valuing God, valuing principles, valuing your word, all of that came, I think, as a result of taking a look at what my life was in that era and saying, I'm never going to put my family through that. I'm just not going to do that. And that was a real big deal for me, a really big deal. And then I had a lot of great influencers from business and so on. But I think the best example of what I eventually became, as far as character, value in my relationship with Bonnie, my relationship with my sons. We can talk about my sons. I'd love to, but sometimes I screwed up, and I screwed up for a long, long time with my sons. For me, that was that influence that I'm not going to look like that when when I'm 78 years old or 76 years old, I'm not going to look like that. I'm not going to be that guy that's got regrets. My dad, after we had formed a better relationship, he had some regrets. And I have some too. When it comes to the relationship with my sons. It's amazing how the wounds that we develop when we're growing up, we have a tendency to pass on. And we don't even know we're passing it on at the time. But all of us get wounded at some point in time. It can be a father, it can be an uncle, it can be a grandfather, it can be a brother. We all get wounded, and unless we're unbelievably cognizant of it, we end up being influenced by the same stuff. And we end up doing the same stuff to the same people.
I'd love to talk about that. I wanted to talk about your sons anyway. You say you have 2 sons. And what are some of those lessons that you would say to our listeners that you learned as you were growing up, and maybe, weave some of those lessons that you learned from the traumas of your childhood into what were some of the mistakes that you made and what were some of the successes that you had as you raised your sons, and tell us a little bit about them, if you would.
Sure. You used the word trauma. So when I was growing up, I never even heard of the word trauma. I just thought that was the way life was. And like I said, remember I said sometime in my sophomore year, I said, I'm not ever going to do that. That was probably when I woke up to the fact, because all of my friends that were some of the same guys that their fathers were oil field roughnecks as well. And so I wouldn't see them in every town I was in, but I'd see them in every 4th town, right? And we just viewed it as this is the way life was, because their dads were hard drinking. They were living large, doing all that stuff that men shouldn't do. And so for me, it wasn't trauma. When my wife and I got married, we started going together when we were juniors in high school, got married in 1966. So this year we've been married for 55 years. And we started having children. I think she was 18 when we got married. And I think we started having children when she was 21. And so we had 2 boys, Guy, who is really Frank. Guy is 51 or so today, and Jared is 47 or so today. I was working 2, 3, or 4 jobs. I had a 40-hour-a-week job, putting in acoustical ceilings and demountable partitions and folding walls and that kind of stuff. I had the only pneumatic nailing gun in town for hire. And so at night and on the weekends, I was out laying and nailing plywood on the roofs. And so I was laying and nailing plywood. I'd go out and lay 30,000 square feet of plywood in a weekend. And so I was working all the time. And when we started having children, I was working, and Bonnie was in the hospital in labor for 12 hours before I showed up, because I had a deadline I had to make. So we kind of had a joke, and it really turned out to be pretty serious. It wasn't a joke. That Bonnie says, I'll make you a deal. I'll take the kids for the first 18 years. You get them the rest of their life. And of course, at that point in time, in 1976, my kids were 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. And I said, oh, hell yeah, that's good. I can do that. And I went out and I built a series of companies that at one point in time employed 1,000 people. Hired a lot of good people for the first 15 years or so. They'd walk into my office and I'd cut them off at the knees and send them out with their tail between their legs. I finally learned how to, and I think Cory, the 6 people that's running Martin Harris today, as a testimony to learning how to build people.
Yeah, amen.
And so I learned that. But where I was going with this is that the fallacy that while that sounded good, that Bonnie would take them the first 18 years and I'd get them the rest of their life, there's a lot of things that go on in that first 18 years that I missed. I was living large. I was flying on jet planes. I was staying in penthouses. While I didn't do the things my dad did while I was doing that, I also wasn't there, just like he wasn't there. And it took a very, very long time for Guy and Jared to forgive me for that. I got them the rest of their lives. My relationship with my sons had a turning point about, I want to say probably about 8 years ago. So we worked on the relationship for a very, very long time. There's still holes, there's still gaps. And I don't know that I'm 74. I've been trying really hard to fill those gaps. Sometimes operating out of guilt in the way that we functioned earlier in our lives, and sometimes operating out of anger because I'm mad at myself because I didn't take the time in those years to form a relationship with my sons. It's easier to form a relationship with somebody that's 10, 12, 14, 15, that lasts, than it is trying to build a relationship at 18. And they remember all the promises I made that didn't get kept. The promises I make about fishing trips and about hunting trips, because there was always another job, another deal, and I am a perennial dealer. And there was always another deal. There was always something else that grabbed that time. And that was very, very regrettable. That's what's easily my biggest regret, is not taking that first 18 years to form the relationship, because we would have started with a much better foundation had I done that.
Yeah, and you have very solid, I know Jared and Guy, obviously. I know Guy a lot better from a working relationship that we have, but they're great men.
They are.
They are gentlemen.
They are. In the finest sense of the word, they're both great fathers, better fathers. I believe I was a better father than my dad was, and they are definitely better fathers than I was. And so are we changing a family dynamic here? Yeah, it's taken 2 generations to get it changed to the point where Guy and Jared are right now, because Jared is unbelievable with his family. He has 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, or 2 girls and a boy. Guy has 2, a boy and a girl, and they both do. Their method of raising children are totally opposite, totally separated, like they're not even brothers. And that in itself has presented issues between Guy and Jared, because Guy raises kids one way, Jared raises kids another way, and both of them are looking at each other saying, well, where'd you get that? How'd that come about? The unique part, while they had a method of raising their kids that were diametrically opposite, when you look at those kids, they've kind of basically all turned out close to the same. Ryan, hardworking mom, that's Guy's daughter. Travis, going to school. McKenna, Jared's oldest daughter, going to school, fixing to graduate this year. Garrett just entered Reinhardt University in Walaska, Georgia. Garrett, like Jared had dyslexia and learning differences, and Garrett has them too, and this Reinhardt University is a special school for that. But if you were to deal with Jared today, Cory, you would never believe he is a severe dyslexic. He is an unbelievably smart man. I mean, works numbers like crazy. He leaves Guy in the dust when it comes to working numbers and working the whip and working that kind of stuff. And Guy is very sharp. You know that from dealing with him.
Oh, yeah. Extremely sharp.
And so, am I proud of my boys? Oh, absolutely. Would I die for them? In a heartbeat. Just wish that I'd had an extra 18 years with them that I didn't have.
Frank, would you go into a little bit? You said 8 years ago something changed and you were able to kind of turn the corner with them. Can you walk us through what happened in that process? Maybe there's somebody listening that's at that point and they want to get to that turning point with their family or someone in their life. What did you do that worked?
We brought in initially a gal by the name of Tish, who was a psychologist, and she helped us out a lot. Took the relationships farther than they had been before. But when you have a relationship that was built on 18 or 20 years of no communication, we go through these series of ups and downs. Our relationship, because that foundation wasn't there, actually, I want to tell you that it started turning around longer than 8 years ago, but it's a work in progress, and it's a work in progress right now. Guy and Jared own a company together that employs probably 200 people and $35-40 million a year in revenue, and they are the very best business partners you could ever see in your life. I mean, they have made this company unbelievably profitable. My prayer is, and I pray about it every day, is that at some point in time, they'll be as good of brothers as they are business partners. But this business partner thing has taught them a whole new level of respect for each other. So when I say it started turning, that is a long journey, Kirk. That is a long, long journey. Like you used to drive a go-kart and you could turn it almost 90 degrees. Well, when you got a relationship that has been broken, wounded, not nurtured for 20 years or more, it's like turning a battleship. I mean, you heard the old country music song, "Give me 40 acres, I'll turn this rig around." Well, a battleship turns around in a section, 640 acres. And so it's a long, slow curve. Now, my boys, they go shoot together. Guy is a sporting clay shooter extraordinaire. Jared goes with him. Their two sons go and shoot together. They started learning that there was some parallel, even though they were different in the way they raised their kids. I'm hoping what they've seen over the course of the last, and it's just been 4 or 5 years, they started seeing more of a parallel in the way they raised the kids instead of one going south and one going north. It's more of a parallel because their kids are turning out awesome. Awesome. Did they lose focus? Oh, hell yeah. Jared is a little tougher on his kids when they lose focus than Guy is. Guy just kind of herds them back into line. Jared, you got the guardrails on each side of the road. Don't cross the guardrails, because he is very direct that way. But their children are outstanding. I mean, just outstanding people. At some point, I'm 74, as I said before, at some point before I'm not here anymore, I see that boat do the 180. I haven't seen it do the 180 just yet. But Bonnie and I pray about that every day. You can change your family going forward, no matter what your background is. You can change that dynamic, but you really have to be focused on it. And for me, I've walked away a number of times. I walked away for 18 years in my kid's life. Now I'm back. Hard work, persistence is what it takes. And then also determination that it can be different. You don't have to accept what you see today as the norm. You just don't.
Well, I know you have a really good relationship with Bonnie. I'm not sure if that's always been as amazing as it is now, but it seems pretty darn amazing. And she's a wonderful, amazing person. She, as you said, carried quite the load the first 18 years. Talk to us about, when you have these great grandkids and great sons, and it's a team sport, as we all know. And sometimes the wives take more of the brunt of things than we'd like to admit. But talk to us about the importance of raising great kids, having a relationship like you do. I don't know if you always were that way, but it seems like your kids have had a good example of what love looks like between you and Bonnie. And how important has that been as part of the family unit?
So my relationship with Bonnie is as strong after 55 years as it was 55 years ago. And probably it's strong, but part of strength is depth. And so I would say it's just as strong, but it's deeper. And there was certainly tough spots. Absolutely. First 3 or 4 years that Martin Harris was in existence, I'd literally work 24 hours a day. I'd fall asleep at a plan table, wake up, and go back to work, and go knock a whisker off and go back to work. And she wouldn't see me for 2 or 3 days. And you can't have a young married couple with 2 babies and that existing for very long without there being some issues. It took us a while to get those get those resolved. I would pray that most of our issues happen when our kids were younger, and so they don't have, it's not real clear in their heads. And I'm not trying to keep any secrets from you kids if you happen to listen to this, but it's just a fact of life that if you can get the bad stuff over with before you're impacting other young lives, it makes the young lives' life simpler and easier. And Bonnie and I did a good job of that. They never ever seen in, I hope and pray, they never ever seen in me what I seen in my father in the way he treated my mom. Okay? I pray that they do not. And to the best of my knowledge, they haven't. They may, if you were to do the same thing with them, they may well have a different picture. They may well remember some stuff. I don't think they do, but who knows? Long story short, they have been married for a long time and have an unbelievable relationship with their wives. Their wives worship the ground that they walk on. And I can tell you that they both, when you take a look at Guy and Trish and Jared and Sarah, you see love, you see, you do see emotion, absolutely. But then I think every good relationship, every great relationship, separation, divorce is never in the conversation. And part of that, I believe, is the influence. Bonnie and I, no matter what we were going through, that was never in the equation, ever. My two sons are outstanding. For me, my two sons have elevated our family values even higher than what I did. And they also their wives didn't take the kids the first 18 years. Neither one of them. I mean, they both spent time with their kids, and it shows in their relationship that they have with their children.
Well, you've been a value-based person ever since I've known you.
Yes.
And I know you're very religious now. I don't know if you were always that way, but is there a certain way, or how do you think you instilled those values that you have in your kids and grandkids? Because I see it. I'm lucky enough to be close enough to your family to know that those values run pretty deep across all of your family. So how did you instill those? How do you think that happened? And where did where did those values come for you?
My wife found the Lord because of the death of her father. And she found the Lord and through a friend of ours that lives in Florida. And she led Bonnie to Christ. And when I watched Bonnie and when I watched what happened, the changes that came over her, I started reading the Bible. I started going to church with a neighbor. Sometime around the time that I actually went into business in 76, 77, we were going to a little church called Gateway Baptist Church, and I gave my life to Christ there. It took me another 20 years to submit to baptism because I am a little bit stubborn. And then I really think where that value came from, Cory, was that Bonnie and I always walked that path. We pray openly. We prayed openly with our children. Our children pray openly with their children. I got to see both of my daughter-in-laws, both of my sons, and all of my grandchildren be baptized and accept Christ as their Lord and Savior. Like everybody, they have a struggle walking the walk. There was a preacher, I think his name was Tozer. Somebody asked him a question about how he preached, and he says, I preach with my life, and sometimes I talk. The way that he lived spoke more than what he could speak from the pulpit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean,
lead by example.
Yeah. I believe that my kids seen me honor my wife, honor Christ, and honor everybody I did business with. You know, I've been out, we merged 6.5 years ago. Well, this November will be 7 years ago.
Yeah.
A ton of those clients that Jack and I went to see when we were doing the merger, they're still my friends. And I haven't signed a contract with them other than calling on the phone and talking and so on. They're still my friends. You know, I had large clients, very, very large clients. Erwin Mulaski, who just passed away, was a very devout Jew. Mark Fine, very devout Jew. But they knew that I was a Christian. And they accepted my views because of the walk that I walked.
Well, that's kind of what we're about here on the podcast, as well as the lives that you live and what it says about you, and what that means. Our ideal is kind of to be known as someone who walks the talk that they talk. And at the end of every podcast, we always ask our guests what they think it means to be a gentleman. And to me, that is the ideal of, who you would want to be at your very best. So if I were to ask you, Frank, what do you think it means to be a gentleman? How would you answer that question?
That's a really good question, because it can't be answered in one word. Let's break that down. Gentle. When you walk and you respect people, regardless of what they've done to you or regardless of anything else, but when you treat them with respect and not with disdain, no matter what else has went on, not with disdain, that brings forward the gentle side. In other words, the gentle side says, I got a heart that is soft. I got a heart that is easily broken. And remembering that I have a heart like that, other people have a heart like that. And so you've got to bring out that soft side. Now, as Cory knows, I can get really doggone passionate about things and get very hard and very decisive. But I always measure that with the word gentle. And then you got the man, a gentle man. The man side of it, I believe, is defined by the principles. What does the white line on this side of the road look like, and what does the white line on this side of the road look like? And then how tight do you build those lines? Because the tighter you build the lines and the tighter you build those guardrails on each side of the road, my feeling is that you become more and more of a man in other people's eyes. And that means, as I said before, walking the talk. More importantly, it means that you can be strong, you can be decisive, and a real man doesn't have to get mad, cuss, or scream to deliver a message.
I like that.
I never found it necessary to scream. I only found it necessary to talk. The man side of that makes that possible.
I really like that, like focusing that attention, and the more and more that you bring those guardrails in on the side of the road, the more focused you get on your purpose as a man and what you're there for, and the more readily recognizable you are as a gentleman. So thank you for that definition, Frank.
And I think some of the greatest changes that people have made in their life is when they've seen something that they want to do differently. I know my dad's that way. He has 3 or 4 things that he was thankful for, and 3 or 4 things he said, I'm never going to do that like my parents. And I think for all of us, we can do that. All of us can ask ourselves, who do I want to be? And I'm going to walk in that direction.
Yep.
And congratulations to you, because, you changed some things, you learned some things. And I believe life's all about learning and growing and becoming the best we can be. Not just ourselves, but with our families. And like you said, generationally, your boys and your grandkids, they're going to be so much different from how you grew up and probably how your parents grew up. And so
right.
You've got great grandkids, amazing gentlemen and sons, and you have definitely learned, grown, and continue to evolve. So congratulations on everything that you've done, Frank.
Thank you so much, Cory.
Your story's been one that's inspired me to be better, to be more involved with my kids in their formative years, to be supportive of them, and to be around as much as I possibly can. You talked today about some stuff that's probably pretty soft on your heart and vulnerable. So from me to you, thank you for that. I think that those are the times that we learn the most, is when we open up just a little bit and show people the ugly parts of us as well as the beautiful parts, because I think a lot of those things are what makes us who we are. So thanks for doing that today for us and our audience. Thank you for joining us on the Gentleman Project podcast. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so. Hop over on Apple Podcasts and give us a review and a rating. That really helps us out. We do appreciate that. Thanks again to Frank Martin for joining us today. We hope you have a great week. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Make it a great week.